Hello, and welcome to Integrating Literacy Strategies into Library Programs. My name is Rachel Thomas. Our goals today are simple. First, we are going to get a better idea of our role as librarians, as well as the role of libraries in today's schools. Then, we are going to take a closer look at steps we can take and strategies we can implement to turn the students we love into students who love to read. So, why use literature-based reading strategies in the library? First, let's take a look at a big problem we've been seeing. Since the 1980s, we've seen an almost continual decline in the number of people who read voluntarily. In one 2008 study, only 50% of Americans reported reading any sort of literature at all, meaning not just books for pleasure, but also literature for school or work. To paraphrase Short et al., the problem is not illiteracy, but illiteracy. People can read, but they're choosing not to. This is especially true for young people aged 18 to 24. Many researchers believe this trend is due to the fact that in high school and college, reading becomes associated with schoolwork, which decreases motivation to read for fun. Here's where the school librarian comes in. According to Martis, a librarian's role includes that of program administrator, information specialist, instructional partner, teacher, and leader. As librarians, we collaborate with classroom teachers, we implement engaging library programs, we recommend new technologies and resources for teachers and students. We empower students to think critically about what they read. We give students the tools they need to live enriched, literate lives. One of the biggest jobs we have as school librarians is to encourage reading in our school. To do this, librarians must know their students, be aware of their interests, their backgrounds, their developmental levels, and other needs. Librarians should also know the school. Martis states that effective school librarians support the school's philosophy, goals, and objectives. Collaborate with classroom teachers and have a good understanding of the curriculum so that the library meets academic needs. Finally, an effective librarian knows the books. If our job is to encourage students to read, we need to help them find books that are interesting and relevant to them. In counteracting growing illiteracy in our society, it is also important to act in accordance to Louise Rosenblatt's reader response theory. In essence, this theory states that there is no single correct interpretation of a text, which is the traditional thinking when it comes to studying literature in an academic setting. That way of thinking causes students to become more focused on finding the right answer rather than truly engaging with a text. Rosenblatt's theory, on the other hand, views reading as a fusion of text and reader. There can't be a single right interpretation of a text because every reader brings with them a unique experience and an individual motivation when approaching a text. Readers' personal background knowledge, first and foremost, allows them to simply connect with the text on a personal level. To quote Short et al., once young adults have made a personal connection, they are more likely to be interested in pursuing a more in-depth analysis of a text. There's our goal. If we want students to analyze and critique a text, then first we have to get them interested and connected with it. So what can we do? I think it boils down to 3 steps. First, we need to get kids time for books. I'm talking about dedicated, no distractions time just for reading during the school day. We need to build reading as a daily habit for our students. Step 2 is to get kids acquainted with books. We can't just bring a student to the library where they're faced with hundreds of overwhelming options and say, find one. We need to give them a starting place with recommendations for books that will be great fits for them as individuals. Step 3, after giving them the time and some titles to choose from, is to help them learn how to connect and engage on a deeper level with their book. Let's take a look at some strategies we can use to achieve these 3 steps. We'll start with step 1, get kids time for books. In her book, Book Love, literacy specialist Penny Kittle recounts the experience of implementing a school-wide reading break in her school, Kennett High School. Essentially, the entire school committed to taking 20 minutes out of every day to just stop and read. This wasn't 20 minutes at the start of a block. It was a standalone time of the day, and every student and staff member was assigned a designated reading area somewhere in the building. Then, students got out their books and read. If a student didn't have a book, every classroom had a selection to choose one from. There was no excuse not to read. Over time, the culture at Kennett High School completely changed, and eventually even the most reluctant readers were carrying around their books with pride. As a scaffold for struggling and defiant readers, Kittle suggests that these students be put into reading groups where everyone will read the same text aloud together. Now, it may not be possible to immediately have a school-wide reading break, but you can always start small. As a classroom teacher, take 20 minutes at the start of class. Let it spread to your department or your grade level. For this strategy to work, every faculty member has to agree that reading is important and worth those precious minutes of instructional time. Up next are strategies for getting kids acquainted with books. Our first one is also from Penny Kittle. It is a strategy called book talks. Essentially, a book talk is just a short presentation recommending a book. These can be done in the front of the classroom or can be digital with videos or blog posts. For a successful book talk, the book should be shown, and then you should discuss what you personally enjoyed about the book. Then give a quick synopsis. If you have the time, Kittle also suggests reading an excerpt from the book to give a little sneak peek. Have students keep a list in a notebook of titles they might be interested in reading next. Let's look at an example of a digital book talk produced by Scholastic for the book Does My Head Look Big in This? By Randa Abdel Fattah.
Hi, welcome to Scholastic Video Book Talks, quick video versions of the book talks written by internationally known book talking expert Joni Richards Bodart. Today's book is Does My Head Look Big in This? By Randa Abdel Fattah. Full-timers is what her Muslim friends call girls who wear the hijab, the headscarf, all the time. Part-timers, like Amal, wear the hijab as part of an Islamic school uniform or when they go to mosque, or just on a bad hair day. But now she was ready to wear the hijab all the time. In 4 days, Amal will be starting 11th grade at the snobby and elitist McLean's prep school, where it's hard enough being an Arab Muslim with hair down to her shoulders. Shalling up is just plain psychotic, but she's going to do it. But being ready and living it are two different things, as Amal begins to discover the next day.
Another strategy is to use student-created book promotions. This includes posters, bulletin boards, book trailers, or even their own book talks. As students read books, let them take pride in their reading by recommending books to their peers. Plus, according to Short et al., teens are actually more likely to read a book when it's been recommended to them by a peer that they want to connect with. On the left is a bulletin board created by teacher Amelia Capitosta. As students finish a title they enjoyed, they add the title to the bulletin board. Students take pride in helping to fill the shelves, and it's also a great tool for students looking for what to read next. On the right are posters from Penny Kittle's Book Love. They exhibit real students at Kennett High School who are involved in school activities with books they've read that relate to those interests. These posters were created by students and are hung throughout her school. A third strategy for book recommendation is to make a teacher is reading poster for your classroom or library. As Short et al. States, books do change lives for the better, and so you need to be a reader to engage adolescents as readers. In other words, we need to practice what we preach. Young adult students look up to teachers who are genuine. If we want students to love to read, we need to show them that we love to read too. These posters are easy to regularly update to show students what books you've been reading. Here is an example created by librarian Shannon Miller at The Library Voice. So now that we've given students time to read and we've helped them figure out what to read, now we can move into strategies for helping students really engage in their reading. First up is an awesome online tool called Storyboard That. Essentially, this is a tool that allows students to create storyboards or comic strips with customizable characters and backdrops. This is a great tool to use with readers who are practicing comprehension skills or readers who are working on plot and sequencing. This would also be a great tool to use for students who are studying graphic novels. They could create their own graphic story. Here is an example that came out of my own classroom. This student used Storyboard That to illustrate how plot events from the Odyssey align with the 12 stages of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey plot structure. You can see that she was able to create the characters, even the Cyclops, add speech bubbles, and even headings and captions for each square. Storyboards can be any size or layout you want, and you as the teacher can even assign a specific template that students can use for their assignment. Up next is a strategy called Up, Down, Both, Why from the Cult of Pedagogy. This strategy focuses on kids making personal connections to their book and then can be transitioned to work with more analytical thinking. The way it works is simple. Students are given a spectrum that moves from a positive, up response on one end to a negative or down response on the other. First, start with just initial personal responses to a text. How do you feel about this book? Give a thumbs up or thumbs down, move to one side of the room or the other, write a paragraph. The great thing about this strategy is that it's really flexible and can be used however you want to. Just make sure to always have students explain their reasoning. Once students have made those initial personal connections, the strategy can then be used to respond to other aspects of the text. This chart shows some of the common ways that the strategy is used to think critically about a text. Rather than just positive or negative, the spectrum changes based on what you're discussing. If you're talking about characters, is the character sympathetic or unsympathetic? If you're talking about themes of a text, is the theme optimistic about the world or pessimistic? This strategy is a great starting point for getting students to identify and develop their opinions about the books they read. This next strategy is designed to teach kids how to talk about books in a way that feels natural and organic. It is called Real Talk, featured on the blog The Cult of Pedagogy. Students read a text, then come up with a list of talking points. These can be questions they come up with, quotes from the text, vocab words, personal connections, essentially anything from the text they want to talk more about. Then students share their talking points and they work together to combine and categorize them. After that, the students in the group come up with their own plan for how their conversation will go. As a scaffold, you can provide sentence stems for students to help them discuss in a way that's truly meaningful. Our last strategy for today is one that I love to use in my own classroom often because it can work with any text: one-pagers. A one-pager is exactly what it sounds like. Students are given a blank page. On that page, they show their responses and connections to the text by using quotes, their own explanations, standout words or phrases, pictures, drawings, symbols, color. One-pagers can be open-ended, or they can be used with more specific guidelines or in response to a certain prompt. This strategy is great because it allows students some freedom and flexibility in showing their learning, and it gives a good opportunity for students to be creative and show their knowledge visually. However, there are always some students who, when faced with a blank page, quickly feel overwhelmed. A great scaffold for this strategy is to give them a template to use that can divide their page into distinct spaces to fill. Let's look at some examples. Both of these one-pagers are from my own classroom. In one of my ELA modules, we learn about the Great Depression, and we focus on the skill of integrating ideas from multiple texts. Students read Christopher Paul Curtis's Bud Not Buddy, which offers a fictional description of a Hooverville settlement. Then they read a nonfiction article on the same topic. In their one-pagers, students show what they've learned about Hoovervilles from the two texts. You can see that the student on the left chose to use a template, while the student on the right started with a completely blank page. This one-pager is in response to a specific text-dependent analysis question for the novel and verse Out of the Dust by Karen Hess. This is a great example of how one-pagers can even be used for deeper critical thinking with our texts. This student still answered the question and supported her thinking with evidence from the text, but it was reformatted in a way that is much more engaging than, say, writing another ERQ. As we come to the end of our session today, it's now time for you to show what you know. Create your own one-pager that demonstrates your big takeaways from our learning today. I've included a list of must-haves that are common for one-pager assignments. Get creative with this. One pagers can be completed on paper, or they can be done digitally with tools like Google Slides or Canva. The choice is yours on this. If you would like a starting place, I've posted a link to a digital one-pager template on Canva. Feel free to move things around and make it your own. I can't wait to see what your big takeaways were from this webinar. Thank you so much for joining me in this webinar. As you can see, our jobs as teachers and librarians are so important. Let's work together to implement these strategies and encourage our students to fall in love with reading. Please use these references for further information about these awesome literacy strategies.